I'm beginning the program with the incoming chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Susan Collins of the great state of Maine, my halftime home. Senator Collins, welcome back. It's good to talk to you, and thank you for getting up early. Congratulations on becoming the chairwoman of Appropriations on January 3rd. Kind of a surprise. A lot of people speculated that Leader McConnell would want that, but it's going to be you with the big job. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'm very excited about it, Hugh, and thank you for inviting me to join you this morning. It has been some 92 years since a Mainer has been at the helm of the Senate Appropriations Committee, so there's a bit of home state pride there as well. But most of all, I want to get us back on track, and that means focusing on the basics of getting the appropriations bills written and signed into law before the new fiscal year begins. We've got to finish up the fiscal year that we're in right now, FY 2025, before we can move on to the next fiscal year. And I think it's really important that we give President Trump a clean slate so that he can focus on fiscal year 2026, give us his budget, and I'm committed to working with him.
Now, Senator, I read a floor speech by you talking about regular order and 12 bills getting 12 votes in the Senate. Is that how it's going to work out this year? You're still in the minority. You don't take over till January 3rd. Do you expect the CR to take us a good way into calendar year 2025 and then fix the rest of it, or for the entire year?
My preference would be that we finish up the 2025 bills in December, because they were supposed to be done by October 1st. Our problem has been that we've been unable to get Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, to bring the bills to the floor, including 6 bills that passed, of the 12, that passed out of our Appropriations Committee unanimously. And it costs the taxpayers money when we operate on continuing resolutions. Those are the short-term spending bills to fill in the gap, because we continue to fund programs that should be either terminated or reduced. We block the start of essential new programs. The Department of Defense can't sign contracts during that period. So my preference is not to go into March, but finish the bills this year so the new administration can concentrate on preparing a budget that is due under law the first Monday in February for the next fiscal year.
Now, Senator, I'm wondering if they can run concurrently. I have a new column at Fox News this morning on the need for the budget resolution to pass the House and the Senate in order for the reconciliation process to be unlocked. Is it wishful thinking to think that the budget resolution for 2026 can be done by the end of February so the trailing bills can follow?
Well, the first thing we have to have is the president's budget, and the budget committee needs to produce the reconciliation bill that you mentioned. And I think we can double track a lot of this work. The most important thing, as you have pointed out, that the reconciliation bill will be used for is to extend a lot of President Trump's 2017 tax package, which I voted for, as did, I believe, every Republican. And those tax bills, those provisions will otherwise expire this year, and that would be disastrous. It would lead to massive tax hikes. I was talking to a small business owner just yesterday who outlined what it would mean for his business and what a boost the Trump 2017 tax cuts have been for his small business right here in Bangor, Maine.
I am curious, Senator, do you expect the SALT deduction to rise in the revision of an extension of the Trump tax cuts? There are two things we know. The tax on tips is going to go away, but the president-elect has talked about the SALT limit going up as well. I think that's very healthy. It's especially important in Maine, New York, California, places with high property taxes. Do you expect that to be part of the package for reconciliation?
I hope it will be, but it's very controversial, as you know. I don't think it's fair to have a tax on a tax, and that's essentially what it is when you don't allow taxpayers to deduct the full amount of their state and local taxes, including property taxes. As you know, many people in Maine have a what we call a camp, a cabin on a lake. Why shouldn't they be able to deduct the full amount of their real estate taxes on their home and on their camp, for example, as well as the state income tax? I would also point out that there's a marriage penalty involved here, and generally we're against having marriage penalties because if you are a single person, you can deduct up to $10,000 under the current SALT limit. If you're married, it's still only 10,000. Couldn't we at least eliminate the marriage penalty so that two people who are married could deduct 20,000? That's
Makes
the bill
sense to
that
me.
I've introduced.
So, Senator, what is your role as chair of appropriations in budget reconciliation? I know there's a budget committee, but they've got to talk to you about this. Are you in the room like you were on the PPP when you were negotiating the specifics of the budget reconciliation? Because that is the mother lode.
It, it is so important, and we haven't had a budget resolution in years under the Democratic control. So I will certainly be involved. It falls under the jurisdiction of the Budget Committee rather than appropriations, but it obviously shapes and guides the work that we do. Most important of all, it gives us a top line figure for the budget. And that is really useful for that to go through the House and the Senate. The budget resolution does not go to the president for his signature. So this is something that we need to do so that we have a top line for the appropriations process. And as you know, one of my top priorities is strengthening our national defense. So once I get a top line, I can negotiate with the Democrats on how much each of the subcommittees on appropriations will get. And national defense is a huge priority for me. It is very alarming that under the Biden administration budget request for defense, we would have the smallest Air Force in history, and our naval fleet of 296 ships will be shrunk by 5 ships over the next 5 years, while China's Navy continues to grow to more than 435 ships. So a strong national defense is really important to me.
I spoke to Admiral Mark Montgomery. Rear Admiral Montgomery's retired yesterday. He said we're down to 3.1% GDP. We've got to get back to 3.5% minimum. Do you share his objective over 4 years, Senator?
I absolutely do, and that's why I negotiated this year an increase beyond the president's budget of about $23 billion. That money is desperately needed. I talked to the combatant commanders all over the globe, and to a person, they tell me this is the most dangerous time for global threats that we've experienced since World War II. And we can't ignore that imperative.
Senator, I want to talk to you about 3 things before you run. I might keep you during the break for a second and play it after the break. One is the return of earmarks and riders. The second is it's kind of a hometown issue, which is the destroyers that are in the Kennebec. There aren't enough of them. And then I want to talk to you about the Rue Institute. So first, are appropriations riders and earmarks back?
They are back. And let me explain to your listeners that to me, this is an issue of whether the executive branch is making spending decisions or whether we in Congress, who have a constitutional authority or have the power of the purse, are making spending decisions. And to me, we in Congress know our state's needs far better than someone who's never been to the state of Maine, who is working in a federal agency or department in Washington. At least they should be working. Too many of them are still at home, and that's a whole nother issue.
I agree with you, Senator, on appropriations on both riders and on earmarks. One of those earmarks I'd like to see is for more Arleigh Burke destroyers because I've read everything that I can. I'm a civilian. I'm not a military person, but they work. They're important. They do a lot of heavy lifting. They protect our carriers. We only have 3 of them in the Kennebec. What about more of those per year, Senator?
We definitely need to produce more destroyers. One has only to look at the role the destroyers have played in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean to realize how important they are in shooting down the Houthi missiles that have been aimed at not only at Israel, but at commercial ships to try to bring commercial shipping to a halt. And the Arleigh Burke destroyers that are built at Bath Iron Works and at Ingalls Shipyard in Mississippi. I'm very proud of the BIW destroyers, all of our destroyers I'm very proud of, because they played a critical role in protecting Israel, in keeping the shipping lanes open, and protecting our own troops, some of whom have lost their lives. But our destroyers have an incredible record. And keep in mind, the Houthis out of Yemen are a terrorist group. They're a proxy of Iran. It's all coordinated by Iran. And it is those destroyers are absolutely critical. One of them that was built at Bath Iron Works has a perfect record of shooting down 22 missiles that were aimed at Israel and at commercial ships in the Red Sea.
And I want people to know, we used to build 17 destroyers a year on the Kennebec River in Maine. It's down to 1.5 a year. So I think it's vitally important. Last question, Senator. I'm a big enthusiast of the Rue Institute, which is coming to Portland, Maine. I don't live in Portland, but I think AI is the future, and we can't just have it all in Silicon Valley. I wouldn't even mind an earmark for it. What do you think about the Rue Institute?
Well, the Rue Institute is concentrating on high-tech jobs. And I'll tell you that any group, and it's out of Northeastern University, any group that is willing to work collaboratively with other educational institutions of Maine, including the University of Maine, our community colleges, to produce more skilled workers for our state so that young people don't feel that they have to leave Maine to get a good job. These are the jobs of the future, and I certainly welcome the efforts of the Rue Institute and appreciate David Rue, after whom it's named, for his generous contributions.
Senator Collins, good to talk to you. Your website is susancollins.com. I look forward to talking to you throughout the next 2 years, and good luck in the incoming chair because, boy, that's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work, America, but Susan Collins can get it done. I appreciate it, Senator. Have a good morning.
Thanks so much, Hugh.
I started the morning with Senator Collins. I kept her over a little bit so that we could talk about some Maine-specific issues, which I'm going to play right now because they matter to the entire country. Let's go back to what I talked with Senator Collins about during the break. I am back with Senator Collins. I agree with you, Senator, on appropriations on both riders and on earmarks. One of those earmarks I'd like to see is for more Arleigh Burke destroyers because I've read everything that I can. I'm a civilian. I'm not a military person, but they work. They're important. They do a lot of heavy lifting. They protect our carriers. We only have 3 of them in the Kennebec. What about more of those per year, Senator?
We definitely need to produce more destroyers. One has only to look at the role the destroyers have played in the Red Sea and the Mediterranean to realize how important they are in shooting down the Houthi missiles that have been aimed at not only at Israel, but at commercial ships to try to bring commercial shipping to a halt. And the Arleigh Burke destroyers that are built at Bath Iron Works and at Ingalls Shipyard in Mississippi. I'm very proud of the BIW destroyers, all of our destroyers I'm very proud of, because they played a critical role in protecting Israel, in keeping the shipping lanes open and protecting our own troops, some of whom have lost their lives. But our destroyers have an incredible record. And keep in mind, the Houthis out of Yemen are a terrorist group. They're a proxy of Iran. It's all coordinated by Iran. And it is those destroyers are absolutely critical. One of them that was built at Bath Iron Works has a perfect record of shooting down 22 missiles that were aimed at Israel and at commercial ships in the Red Sea.
And I want people to, we used to build 17 destroyers a year on the Kennebec River in Maine. It's down to 1.5 a year. So I think it's vitally important. Last question, Senator. I'm a big enthusiast of the Rue Institute, which is coming to Portland, Maine. I don't live in Portland, but I think AI is the future, and we can't just have it all in Silicon Valley. I wouldn't even mind an earmark for it. What do you think about the Rue Institute?
Well, the Rue Institute is concentrating on high-tech jobs. And I'll tell you that any group, and it's out of Northeastern University, any group that is willing to work collaboratively with other educational institutions of Maine, including the University of Maine, our community colleges, to produce more skilled workers for our state so that young people don't feel that they have to leave Maine to get a good job. These are the jobs of the future, and I certainly welcome the efforts of the Rue Institute and appreciate David Rue, after whom it's named, for his generous contributions.
Senator Collins, good to talk to you. Your website is susancollins.com. I look forward to talking to you throughout the next 2 years, and good luck in the incoming chair because, boy, that's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work, America, but Susan Collins can get it done. I appreciate it, Senator. Have a good morning.
Thanks so much, Hugh.
I really think Senator Collins may be my favorite senator. Rob Portman was, and he retired because he was a University of Michigan lawyer like I am and from Ohio. I'm a half-time Mainer now, and I may become a full-time Mainer sometime in the future. But I'm here to tell you, Susan Collins works hard. We need to get her reelected. Democrats always run someone against her. They always get blown out. I don't know who they're going to try and run, but they dump bazillions of dollars in against her. Head over to susancollins.com. Keep the majority. Keep Susan Collins. SusanCollins.com. And I want to tell you, the Rue Institute I know about because Two Speeds Tony. Every time I sit down with Two Speeds Tony or Brian the banker or Mark the digger or George the Marine, we end up talking about the Rue Institute because we're going to change all of Maine from top to bottom. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a very technical issue, budget reconciliation, which I touched on with Senator Collins. I'm going to talk about that at length. It's the subject of my new Fox News column. And I posted it on my X account. If you want to go a shortcut there, you can go over to Fox News Hugh Hewitt, where all my columns are. But I want to talk to you first about Angel Tree, very close and near and dear to our hearts. I have begun the Angel Tree Drive. Every child in America deserves Christmas. And if mom or dad or both parents are in jail, it's pretty hard for Christmas to come. That's where our friends at Prison Fellowship, the Angel Tree Ministry, step in. $30 takes care of one child. Every $30 you contribute means that one parent who is in prison sends a note and a present that the child is given on a list to Santa, and it shows up on Christmas morning under the tree with the note from mom or dad, who's behind bars, the Christmas present, and a Bible. And more importantly, a connection to Angel Tree. Someone in their lives who's not as stressed as their mom or their dad who's taking care of them, or their grandma if both parents are in jail, or a social worker. Whatever it is, Christmas belongs to children, and your contribution matters a great deal. Give a listen to Heather Rice Minus, who's the CEO of Angel Tree.
Not only are they not forgotten by their parent, but they are loved by their parent behind bars, and they're also loved by their Heavenly Father, and they get access to a free kids Bible. And guess what? It may just be starting with a present, but our goal is for it to be a ministry of presence all year round.
And that is my goal as well, and you can help us do that. The banner is atop HughHewitt.com, or you can call 888-206 2764. 888-206-2764. I prefer if you use the banner. By the way, the banner to send best wishes to Dennis Prager as he recovers from his injuries is at hughhewitt.com as well. And that's where you go. We get all that over to Dennis, and it's very encouraging to him. Please go and do that. Let me also talk to you while I'm thinking about it, about our friends at Conservatives for Lower Healthcare Costs, because I didn't have time to talk to Susan Collins about this. She doesn't control the calendar in December. She's not the chair of the Appropriations Committee, or this thing would be dead. But Big Pharma is trying to get a big handout before the Democrats leave, because Big Pharma is a friend of Democrats. And if you will head over to conservatives4lowerhealthcare.com, it's easy, pharmawindfall.com. Pharmawindfall.com. Just head to pharmawindfall.com and stop it. Stop it. Tell everyone, they'll help you find your senators and your congresspeople. We do not want to give $30 billion to Big Pharma. They are not our friends. Bobby Kennedy Jr. doesn't like them at all. I don't dislike them. I like their R&D. I like what they produce. I do not. They sold us down the river on Obamacare. We're stuck with that now. That's why we have this enormous budget deficit and the national debt at $36 trillion. One of the many reasons, but we do not want delinking. That's what they want. They want delinking so they can push their drugs on you, as opposed to the pharmacy benefit managers giving you the cheapest alternative in the pharmacy. And you do want to switch out. You want a generic whenever you can get a generic. Go to pharmawindfall.com and stop that from happening. Pharmawindfall.com. Now, let me tell you about budget reconciliation just a little bit. At the beginning of every year, the Budget Committee at the House and the Senate, whether or not the president sends them a budget, and Russ Vought is his incoming budget director, so he knows how to do this. Mike Waltz is his incoming national security advisor and is also on armed services and intel, so he knows how to do this. The president ought to say, we're not doing a budget. We're going to send Russ and Mike up to the Hill to sit down with the head of the Budget Committee and the head of the Appropriations Committee in both the House and the Senate. Big six. So one of the big six would be Susan Collins. And you six, you get together and do the top line. Get the budget resolution done so we know how much is going everywhere. Because when you do that, and we know how big the deficit will be, and the deficit's going to be eye-popping this year. It's going to be completely eye-popping. Because unlike Joe Biden, who's going to send out checks to everyone, Donald Trump's going to get the border wall built, the Border Patrol expanded, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Service expanded, and their detention facilities expanded. The cost of the deportation of the 1.2 million people with deportation orders has got to be factored in. That's all going to be in there. At the same time, we need a military buildup, and we need it right away. Roger Wicker has laid it out from the Senate Armed Services Committee. We ought to fund it. And that's destroyers on the Kennebank. That is frigates in Wisconsin. It is submarines everywhere. It is a carrier here, and it's a lot of different things everywhere. And we've got to move the emphasis from the Army to the Navy and the Air Force. We need the B-21s. So my Morning Glory column for Fox News is simply entitled, Is the New Budget Done Yet? That's the question that President-elect Trump, should be asking John Thune and Speaker Johnson whenever he talks to the Senate Majority Leader incoming, or the Speaker of the House who's going to remain Speaker of the House. Is it done yet? Because the budget process, when they can agree on the budget, the top line number, this is what the budget's going to be, then they send it to appropriations, and then the appropriators get to work getting it done. More importantly, if something is agreed to in the budget, including the extension and revision of the Trump tax cuts and making them permanent, then it can pass the Senate with a simple majority. Now, we need to extend the Trump tax cut. We also need defense. We also need the defense appropriations. You can do anything in a trailer bill that is related to the budget, genuinely related to the budget. You can also, by the way, regularize the dreamers. And you can be a border hawk and a dreamer dove. And I think Donald Trump should do that. He can do a Nixon to China on the dreamers. You can also do all sorts of things with school choice. You can mandate, for example, that any federal spending on state school systems is conditioned on the state adopting at least a school choice program, the equal of Ohio or Florida or Iowa. There are a bunch of them. West Virginia got a great school choice program. Texas will have one soon because Greg Abbott got to work and took out all the people who wanted to obstruct school choice. So when you get the budget reconciliation process done, the world is open to you without the Senate filibuster. Now, you can't do policy things. It has to be related to the budget. But military spending is related to the budget. It's the heart of the budget. And they can up that dramatically, and they can direct it to specific things. Submarine repair, shipyard expansion, more frigates, more destroyers on the Kennebec, more aircraft, more F-35, more B-21s. They can do whatever they want in the Congress once they get the budget reconciliation process underway. And it begins with the budget. The rest vote, and Mike Waltz ought to get together with the chairman of the Budget Committee in both the House and the Senate and the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in both the House and the Senate. I don't know who the chair of Appropes in the House is. I know that Ken Calvert is chair of Defense in the House, but I know Leader McConnell, very gracious, gentlemanly thing. He could have pushed Susan Collins back to chair of Defense, Appropes, but she's chairman of the whole committee. Leader McConnell doing a very, very smart thing and saying, I just want to focus on defense. He knows defense inside and out. He knows what we've got to get done. I'm sure that Senator Collins and he will be consulting on the budget appropriations process. I know Senator Thune will be involved, but we got to move fast. It is typically the process in D.C., we'll get to it by April 15th. No, fast. And this is the reason why. The House majority for the Republicans is very small. It's 3 people. After we lose Elise Stefanik and Michael Waltz and Matt Gaetz has resigned, and at least one other member is going somewhere, I think. But it's going to be lower than normal until the special elections are held. So it's vitally important that everyone focus and execute on the budget so that the budget reconciliation bills can follow right behind, that the Trump tax cuts get extended, that the border wall get built, ICE get expanded, Border Patrol get expanded, that we do school choice reform, but mostly military. We got to deter China. We got to rebuild our ammunition supplies. We got to restock. Same thing Trump did the first time. The Obama administration left the cupboard bare. Biden has done more than leave the cupboard bare. He left the cupboard bare with a bunch of IOUs to other countries, which are good, but we got to build them. And that takes money. So the red ink is going to be, it's going to be a tidal wave of red ink in year one. It'll take a while for the growth to kick in. But if we want to hold the House in 2026, and we want to hold the Senate in 2026, there are 20 Republicans up for re-election. I think Senator Collins is going to be safe. We're going to make everything we can to keep her safe, though Democrats will spend $25 million to try and beat her. And they run the worst ads. And she's like indestructible, but she puts up. If there's a comic book hero who gets stronger the more you throw at him, it's Susan Collins. Tom Tillis is up. Good friend of mine, good friend of the program. We'll be having him on a lot. I think those are probably the 2 Republicans that will be most in the crosshairs of Democrats. But there are a couple Democrats that Republicans can go after, and we'll get into that. But in the meantime, we got to get the budget done so we get the tax cut extended, because that means everybody wins. Jobs come back. When businesses know what they're going to pay in taxes, jobs come back. And the economy accelerates without inflation when you get prices down. And we got to increase the SALT deduction. Americans have spoken. They got to get the SALT deduction done. Now, I want to go to Mary Catherine Ham, who was on with Laura Ingraham last night, because Mary Catherine got asked by Laura, why is Trump avoiding the FBI background? This is perfect. Mary Catherine Ham of Getting Hammered with Laura Ingraham last night, cut number 1.
Yeah, sure, Dan. We'll take that under advisement. The idea that by getting elected by the popular vote and the Electoral College and then naming people to his cabinet, he's dismantling the government, seems insane to me. And I would like to echo Molly with the idea that the FBI should be trusted by a Trump transition team. I cannot express how wild that is without using cuss words. I'm having trouble, because these people were engaged in the most egregious behavior, lying to the FISA court to literally spy on members of his campaign. And then they're going to come down to Mar-a-Lago and be like, we got this. Let us vet everyone for you. I just think there are other ways to do that. The Senate has a job to advise and consent, not under Dan Goldman's direction, but under the Constitution's. And there can be other entities that do vetting. And I just do not think under any circumstances that Trump should be like, sure, come on down, guys.
I would never let the FBI near my people. Not until Kash Patel is on the top floor. And people, oh, Kash Patel, he's so dangerous. No, he's not. He's a fine lawyer. He worked for Devin Nunes. He knows what he's doing. If he gets put in charge of the FBI, they will clean out the top floor in a hurry. And the agents on the street and in the federal offices, the special agents in charge all across the United States, they got nothing to worry about from Kash. He is just there to clean up headquarters and stop them from being a political arm of the Democratic Party, which they have been. Jack Smith gave up yesterday. I forgot to check the market for you, so I'm going to do it right now. Brought to you by our friends at AmericanFederal.com, Nick Grovich and his team. You can call them, or you can go to AmericanFederal.com, or you can call them at 800-221-7694. That's 800-221-7694. One more time, 1-800-221-7694. They bring you the market update every day from what happened yesterday and what it looks like today. And gold this morning is at $2,632 an ounce. And remember, American Federal buys gold and they sell gold. They make their money on commission. So the strike price today is $2,632. So that's what an ounce costs. That's if you want to get a maple leaf or an American Eagle or a Krugerrand, which is 1 ounce of gold, you'll pay $2,632 in a perfect world, but it's not a perfect world. They're friction costs. Nick Grovich has got to feed his family, so they charge a commission. The more gold you buy, the less the commission, and the more gold you sell, the less the commission. So they are buying and selling gold all day long, and they're experts at it, and they are honest. All right, this is the key part. They're not selling you. I mean, they have a coin collector's department if you're one of those people. I am not. Most of the people listening to this audience are not. They will deal with you if you want to collect the coin, if you want to invest in numismatics, whatever they're called. But if you just want gold for the safety deposit box, you want to give your grandkids or your kids a present that they can't spend at the comic book store, or go get Pokemon cards with you, give them an ounce of gold, and they love playing with it. Then they put it away, and it'll be there for college. $2,632. Yesterday, the market had a great day. Dow was up 440 points. The S&P up 18. The NASDAQ up 51. Markets look good this morning again. The Trump bubble boom, call it what you want. Some people call it a bubble. It almost always happens when a new administration is coming to town. People start feeling good. But people are really feeling good because the Trump tax cuts are going to get extended. As you just heard Susan Collins say, priority number one, revise and extend, revise and extend. And by the way, if you're staggering under your property tax bill in New York State, you're going to get some relief. California, you're going to get some relief. I always was against it. People remember I argued with Kevin McCarthy on the show. I argued with Paul Ryan on the show. When people buy a house 25 years ago in California or in Minnesota or in any place where there are big property taxes, they buy a house, they build a life around the promise in the tax code that they can deduct the mortgage interest. And then the Trump tax cuts did away with that. It was an ideological deal. He wasn't really focused on it, Trump. He comes from New York, which has enormous property taxes. But every Republican congressperson that got wiped out in California, thank you very much to the folks who ran the Ways and Means Committee 4 years ago when they did that. It was a dumb idea, getting rid of the SALT deduction. What they left was a $10,000 deduction, which barely covers people's income tax and property taxes. And it doesn't. It just doesn't. So it's got to go up, and it's going to go up, and that's going to let the boom go. And that's why, if you're worried about the boom, if you think it'll cause inflation, I don't, because there's going to be real growth. Not going to be transfer payments to people who go out and spend it. Going to be real growth. Small businesses are getting a tax break. People who already own a home or are about to buy a home are going to get a tax break. That's good. That's very good. But if you want to protect yourself against inflation, head over to AmericanFederal.com. I've done something in the studio that has lost my picture, but we're going to bring it back up on a different computer here. It's a rat's nest in here, and so occasionally I'm falsely accused of disconnecting a wire or not. Byron York, are you with us?
I am here. Good morning, Hugh.
Good morning to you. I've been falsely accused by my team of tumbling over the wires and disconnecting the picture, but you're not on the picture anyway. Byron, let's talk a little bit about the Jack Smith throwing in the towel yesterday before we moved to the cabinet. It's a complete win for Donald Trump, 100%. And I think Mershon will dismiss as well. The Atlanta case has fallen apart. On the whole, what did weaponization do? Did it reelect Donald Trump?
Well, it certainly helped. You have to go back to the first indictment of Trump, in the New York case, the Alvin Bragg case, to see his polls just start going up. And they kept going up as the legal pursuit continued. And what was additionally interesting was by the time of, I would say, the third indictment, public interest in each successive event went down. I mean, if you were hoping to bring Trump down through lawfare, you would certainly want the public to be interested and be outraged at these terrible things that Trump did, you have exposed. And instead, with each successive indictment, the public's reaction was kind of ho-hum, they're going after him again.
Now, I am hopeful that Pam Bondi, when she is confirmed, issues an order. I want to know everyone who touched every one of these prosecutions. I want the referral from the archives. I want to know who signed the referral from the archives, because we're going to recommend those people be fired. I want to know everyone in the U.S. Attorney's Office that handled this. I want everyone in the criminal division, because we don't prosecute presidents and we do not raid their houses. Do you think that will happen, Byron York?
It might. You know, one of the things, and now I would defer to your expertise here, is there by January 2029, when Trump would leave office, all of these charges would be past the statute of limitations. Although, as we've seen in other cases, there will be people who argue that no, it's not. They can still go after Trump. It seems to me that the one thing you cannot have is a criminal charge hanging over a president. And it seems to me that it would be a good idea to make that clear, that these charges are dead, completely, forever dead.
Now, how do you, by pardon, you mean?
Well, now you're the lawyer here, but didn't they ask that these be dismissed without prejudice so that they could be brought up again in the future
Yes.
if
Yes,
necessary?
but
So why do that?
Yeah, I think that the statute of limitations would bar them, the obstruction case in particular, and the January 6th related cases, which were nonsense to begin with. So I don't know that they have to do it. I'd have to look into it. But I know one thing: I would fire everybody who had anything to do with it from the beginning. Let me ask you, Byron. There's a new book out called The Mies Revolution, which I have reviewed for the Free Beacon for this weekend. And it talks about what Ed Meese did in 3.5 years at the Department of Justice. And it was truly extraordinary. The one place of the resistance under Ed Meese were the permanent deputy solicitors general. Charles Freed was Meese's SG, and Charles is a good guy. Teaches at Harvard and went up to Harvard afterwards. He's sort of a very liberal Republican. And he was the reach out to the permanent deputies. If I'm Pam Bondi, I ask Mr. Sauer, who's the nominee to be SG, to fire every one of them, one a week for the next 20 weeks and replace them with a serious originalist. Do you think they will be that bold at justice?
Well, they should be that bold. In a bigger sense, I think you could probably say that personnel was the biggest failure of Trump's first term in office. And the reason for that was Trump sort of believed that you could just appoint a cabinet secretary and then you would have control of that cabinet agency. And it doesn't work that way. You have to go down as deep as you can to make sure that you control, that the President of the United States controls the agency. So instructing his cabinet appointees, first of all, filling all the offices, and Trump sometimes didn't fill positions further down in the departments. First of all, filling those all, and then having your cabinet officers like Pam Bondi go deeper than that is absolutely essential this time around for Trump.
Now I want to talk to you about reconciliation. I wrote a column for Fox News this morning on reconciliation. And I really want them to roll out fast. It's not in the nature of Congress to roll out fast. Do you think Trump can make them roll out fast?
Well, he's certainly gotten a really fast start with the things that he controls, naming his cabinet and other top officials. I mean, he has been moving really fast. And the message of that is, yeah, there's 2 or 3 that are still controversial. But, I mean, look at the large number of really good decisions he's made. And the message of that is he's not messing around, and he's in a hurry. And he understands that he is a lame duck president. And he's going to go as fast as he can. So I think that's good. And if I read your article correctly, I mean, the deal is that one, he needs to extend and revise his tax cuts, which would expire otherwise. You do that through reconciliation, but you only do that when you have a budget. So please, Mr. Speaker of the House, let's get a budget.
Yeah, and normally what Senator Collins told me in the first hour is that you have to wait for the president's budget to get there. That's all procedure. I think that if you take Russ Vought and Mike Waltz, the one guy is OMB, the other guy is National Security Advisor, you put them in a room with the chair of budget in the Senate and Susan Collins, who will chair appropriations, and the chair of appropriations and budget in the House, and you say to the 6 of them, we want the budget. We want the top line. We want to jam it through. And then if you're Trump, you say to everyone, if you oppose this budget, I'm going to primary you. I'm going to find someone to primary you. Because the economy's got to be booming by the reelect, right, Byron? Or they'll lose the House.
Yeah. And, I mean, they barely have the House right now. I mean, what is the Republican total now?
221. I think that Duarte's going to hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, 221.
That is really incredibly tight. So moving as fast as possible is absolutely essential.
So let me talk to you about some other things that are in there. And I talked with Senator Collins about this again. Trump has promised the defense buildup. And it's got to be significant. It's got to be big. And it's got to really chop the Army and send money to the Navy. Do you think that Pete Hegseth has got a grip on this? Or do they need a deputy Secretary of Defense who's the numbers guy or gal, who's the inside person to work the building while Pete works recruitment?
I think the latter, definitely. I mean, there's the big question about Pete Hegseth. I mean, I will just say I went through and I read the police report and all the stuff we have from this case in California, which is just an embarrassing episode, but nothing more than that. But the big question, the real question, the substantive question is the Pentagon budget, I think, is about $850 billion.
Yeah.
It's a huge organization. And does he have the management skills to run that organization? So I think, I think in terms of the direction of the military and the tone and the culture of the military, I think he's got really good ideas. And so I think it would be very important to have somebody there more familiar with the $850 billion.
And you need a Secretary of the Navy and one of the Army and one of the Air Force who actually can prioritize and acquire, but especially the Navy. And that will require a budget plus up. I mean, there might be a lot of red ink. In the first budget under Donald Trump, they provided for a $1.5 trillion deficit. That's what allowed the Trump tax cuts to come through. I'm expecting something like $2.5 trillion on top of the $36 trillion in debt that will allow us to do things like small modular reactors. Doug Burgum will be in charge of that as the National Energy Council chair, and Interior. There's a lot that can be done. How big will the grass be, Byron? I mean, do they want it all?
Well, they have to ask for it first, because as I just said, I mean, this is an extremely unusual situation where a president has just been elected and he can only serve one term. And he knows that he's really only got the first 2 years to get this done. He has the lesson of his first term in which he is elected on a promise to build the wall. And he gets diverted from that. And he does pass a big tax cut bill, which is what we've been talking about. But he gets diverted from his major campaign promise by a Republican bureaucracy that does not want to do it.
Byron, in terms of the budget reconciliation process, he can put in the money and the authority to build the wall, notwithstanding any other law. They had that the first go around. It was not used. Do you think that is a must-have for Donald Trump?
Absolutely. I mean, we were just saying that one of the greatest failures of his first administration was the failure to build the wall as he had promised. And we're not talking about 2,000 miles, but we're talking about a wall on about 1,000 miles of the
Correct.
U.S.-Mexico border that needs it. And he got talked out of it. And he got, he was told by the Republican leadership, we'll take care of this after the midterms, 2018 midterms, when they lost the House. But that was not going to happen. So right now he has a tenuous hold on the House, but he's got the House, he's got the Senate, and he's the president. This is the time to do it.
There's also a chance, and I would do this, but you're a better pulse taker of the GOP generally than I am. I would add in regularization for the Dreamers, a Nixon to China move in this authorization and the reconciliation. Do you think that is possible? Do you think that is wise?
Well, there's two different strains really in the Republican Party. I mean, there is a group that wants to deport everybody who's in the United States illegally. Now, you can say that's not possible. I don't think it's physically possible, but that's what they would like to do. And then there are other people who say that's not really possible. What you have to do is stop the flow. You can reverse some of the damage that was done during the Biden years, but not all of it. And the best you can get is to stop the flow and regularize people who are actually here. My feeling is with the people who come in the last 3 years who have not obviously had a long history in the United States, you can actually deport quite a few of them. But in terms of people who've been here for a long time, you're not going to deport them, but you could use their future, that is regularization, to get yourself a wall.
Well, this is the term I want people to use. Regularization is not a path to citizenship. It is a blue card. It is a purple card. It's a card that says you didn't get in legally, but we're going to let you stay here unless you get in trouble with the law in a serious way. And that might include a DUI. It might include a first-time arrest. You can come up with those rules, but it seems to me he would accomplish a political grand slam home run if he did both the wall and regularization for Dreamers. Byron, do you agree with that?
Well, I think the wall's more important politically. Whatever he can do to get that done, because it was his premier campaign promise in 2016. It wasn't done. He tried to claim that it was really done, but it wasn't. And this is something and given what we've just seen for the last 4 years, the importance of it is huge.
I think Mr. Homan being out there doing the messaging that he's doing is itself going to have an impact on people who are thinking about leaving for the United States. Do you agree that the messaging is now taking effect?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and Homan is important for two reasons. One is messaging, and then two is the substance. He's going to do it. If it's possible to enforce some of the stuff, I think Tom Homan is going to get it done. So it is important, and I think I would assume we'll see some sort of rush or attempted rush to the border in the last weeks of the Biden administration. But clearly, what we saw in the Biden years and in the Trump years was that potential illegal border crossers follow the news. They know what's going on, and if they know that it is not possible to cross into the United States and be allowed to stay, which is the most important part, they will stop doing it. And if they see in their town, in Guatemala, Honduras, wherever they are, El Salvador,
they'll stop. Now I want to talk to you about some secondary issues, but they're primary to me. It is possible in a budget reconciliation process, Byron, to say to the states, no more money from the Department of Education via block grants unless and until you enact school choice in your state. Do you think they've got the backbone to do that?
Probably not. My sense is that the idea that that education is a state authority is so entrenched, and obviously I know how deeply the federal government is involved in all areas of education, but just the idea that it's a state matter would be too powerful.
Okay, what about going after colleges with, like my alma mater, has a $50 billion endowment and taxing the endowment, or saying anyone with $1 billion or more gets no federal money for anything? Do you think that is doable? Because it's one way to bring the campuses back to sanity.
It should be doable. it really should be doable because you're absolutely right. We have some colleges that are huge. I mean, some of the Ivy Leagues have been described as, hedge funds with a university attached.
Yep.
So there's absolutely no reason to have huge, generous federal subsidies for an entity that is that rich.
I think just a flat-out ban on federal funding if they've got $1 billion in the endowment, and that means Harvard has to spend $49 billion before they get another federal grant. I'm fine with that. Last question, Byron. The spending cuts that have to come. The more you do, the more you can spend on the military and other things like the wall. I want them to do the easy stuff. I want them to shut down the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities. I want them to do the kind of things that conservatives have long said the federal government should not be involved in. NPRs, PBS, all that stuff. Do you think they will do it?
Well, the argument for those cuts has always been, or those eliminations, has always been that it's just nickels and dimes in terms of the larger federal budget, and that's a fact. That they're not that much money in terms of federal budget. But the bigger point is what you just made, which is these are things the federal government should not be doing. On the other hand, desires to eliminate this or that federal agency or semi-federal agency or expenditure or something have been very difficult to do. And Trump, I think, showed in his first administration that he is not a fiscal conservative, and he's not going to be one now.
But these are particularly obvious targets for the simple reason that the federal deficit is over $1 trillion a year, the debt is at $36 trillion. But I do not believe anyone who says they're going to cut entitlements unless they can cut the easy stuff. It's like someone telling me they're going to lose 100 pounds. Lose 5 first, and I'll believe you. The 5 pounds are the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, NEA, NEH, and a bunch of other stuff. So shouldn't the GOP at least do that in the first budget?
It's really extraordinary. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting is this thing that I think the Washington establishment sees as its own possession.
Yes.
So if you go after it and say, this whole idea of public broadcasting, it was from the 1950s and 1960s when there weren't even TV stations in some places. There was no cable. There was no other programming. There wasn't the web. And so you actually could use, quote, educational programming. Those days are long gone. The kind of stuff that they would have broadcast then is available in so many other places right now. If you just try to make this argument that it's an outdated idea, they just don't believe it. They think this is a personal possession of their own.
And we go back to the Harvard endowment, $50 billion. The NEA and the NEH every year gets about $500 million total. Let Harvard pay for it. I do not understand why taxpayers have to pay for this stuff. And I think Republicans could score a lot of points if they put some pelts on the wall. Last question, Byron, will they?
Are they going to zero out any federal agency? Is that the question?
Yes.
No.
Byron, I think they will. I'm an optimist because they got to win, and they get 2 shots at this before the Congress typically flips, and they got to deliver something if they're going to run for re-election. Last question. Donald Trump can say to every member of Congress and to the 20 Republicans who are running for Senate, unless you do what I want you to do on the budget, I am going to recruit someone to run against you in the primary. Will that be effective?
Now, that is a very credible threat that Trump can make. I mean, we were talking about, can Trump really zero out a federal agency or do something that he has threatened? Maybe not. But in terms of, I can withhold my support from you, I can find somebody to run against you. He's done it. He's shown an enormous power in terms of endorsing candidates in Republican primaries, and he's got a lot of power, which he could use there.
And if you are a marginal seat, and let's just take John Duarte, who's going to win barely in California because California's crazy voting. They're still counting in California. It's unbelievable. But if he goes to John Duarte and say, John, I want this budget with these authorities, and I know you like X, Y, and Z, but unless you vote for this, I'm running someone in the primary. Doesn't Duarte do what he wants done?
Yes, he does. That's Trump's power here. I mean, Duarte doesn't want Trump to make him famous in a bad way.
That's it. Hey, do you have any idea what Matt Gaetz is going to do?
No, there had been this speculation that maybe he was actually going to be in the 119th Congress, and he said, no, not going to happen. But I'm going to still be involved. They always say they're going to still be involved, but I have no idea.
Well, I think he's running for governor of Florida, isn't he?
Well, he could. Is that? I don't know.
Byron Donalds is going to do it. Maybe Mrs. DeSantis is going to do it. It's going to be a wild race in 2 years. Byron York, always a pleasure to talk to you. Follow Byron on Twitter at Byron York. Follow him at the Washington Examiner. Of course, watch him on Fox News many, many times a week. And Byron, I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me, and a happy Thanksgiving to you.
Thank you, Hugh. Happy Thanksgiving to you, too.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier that Jack Smith, I've managed to repair the studio because I'm highly technical and I have all sorts of capabilities. Someday we are going to play the Ohio State song, Adam, because it is game week. I just tried to remind you yesterday, but when we come back from break, perhaps we will get one Ohio State fight song in. We're not going to talk about the team up north or about that state, which did the right thing in the election, but the Buckeyes ought to crush them. I mean, just crush them. Hope it's 100-0, and it might be. The right thing was done by Jack Smith finally. He dismissed the cases yesterday in both D.C. and Florida. And Ellie Honig, he's a liberal, right? He's on CNN. There are two conservatives on CNN, Scott Jennings and David Urban, two. Ellie Honig is not one of them. Ellie Honig said this about the dismissals. Cut number 2.
Well, Alex, the bottom line is it's over. Both of these cases are over. Yes, Evan's correct. Technically, they were filed without prejudice, which means theoretically they can be revived in 2029. That's not going to happen. Let's be realistic. Some prosecutor's not going to come in 4 and change years from now and revive these cases. For all intents and purposes, it's over. And it's really important to understand why Jack Smith is making these moves. He's not making them because Donald Trump has promised to fire him. He's making these moves because he has to. Under long-standing Justice Department policy that goes back to 1973, Jack Smith says, I asked DOJ to review that policy, and they confirmed to me that I cannot carry on with the prosecution of Donald Trump once he gets sworn in on January 20th. So this is really a result of DOJ's institutional policy and institutional interests.
Good for Ellie. Let's go to Jonathan Turley, Professor Turley on yesterday with Brett Baer, cut number 3.
But in this case, Smith was like a captain who would soon be without a ship or crew, and he had to dismiss this case. It wasn't by choice. In many respects, Smith, up until the very end, was fulfilling the stereotype of his critics. He pushed to release information before the election that he did not have to put on the public record. Even the court said it was procedurally irregular, but she still went with it and released the information. It was viewed as nothing short of election interference. He was trying to influence the election. What Smith knew is that this election would have the effect of the largest jury verdict in history, that if the president was elected, he was out of a job. And that turned out to be true.
That is, and keep going with Jonathan Turley, cut number 4.
Well, this is what we expected. I wrote over a year ago that there was a good chance Jack Smith would never see the inside of a courtroom for a trial in this case. It made this election the largest effective jury verdict in history by reelecting Donald Trump. The special counsel found himself at odds with his own department's longstanding policy against the prosecution of a sitting president. But Smith did not go quietly into that night. I expected he did get a lot of different opinions, hoping for the right one. But the OLC, this office that handles such questions, has long taken this position. So it would be doubtful that they would change it here. But, you know, Smith had a sort of a gratuitous end to his term. You know, he pushed not only for a trial before the election, and he pushed for months for that, but he also released damaging information before the election, something that many people saw as an effort to influence the election. Smith knew that if Trump won, he was out of a job. And this release of the information was entirely unnecessary. The judge admitted that it was procedurally irregular, but she went along with it. And I think that did tarnish his position, and certainly in history, because he didn't have to do that. He had become so absolutely fixated on trying Trump before the election that he lost credibility, I think, with the courts. He went up to the Supreme Court. They didn't accept that was the overriding consideration in looking at these legal issues. I think it's also very important to remember that Smith's case was riddled with constitutional problems. You know, when the Supreme Court reached its immunity decision, it was clear that he would have to pare down his indictment. He really didn't do it to the degree he needed to do. He took a very minimalist approach. He removed a few references, a few witnesses that stemmed from the first Trump presidency. But he largely just repackaged it. And some of us said that we thought that it was not enough, that if he ever did go to trial, he could be reversed just on that basis.
Okay, now that's the news. It's done. It's done, done, and done. Let me talk to you a little bit about the process that is ahead for the budget reconciliation. It is up to the president to get Russ Vought, and I think Mike Waltz, and maybe Bessent, to go with the House and the Senate. Bessent is going to be the Secretary of the Treasury. Russ Vought is going to run OMB. Michael Waltz is the National Security Advisor. Those three sort of are the whole world of the key economic advisors and defense advisors, to send them up to meet with maybe 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate to do the budget, do the top line of the budget, get going on the budget. And by that, I mean, all you need to do is big, broad strokes, and you have to agree on the deficit number for the next couple of years. And it's going to be big. It's going to be a lot of red ink, because we're going to extend and make permanent the Trump tax cuts. We're going to revise them, expand the SALT deduction. It's $10,000 right now. It ought to be $25,000 or $30,000. We're going to get rid of the tax on tips. That will have an impact. Now, there are ways to raise money. In my column, I propose one big idea. Allow everyone in America with money in an IRA or a 401k to convert it to a Roth IRA with a 10% tax in this year. So if you have $100,000 in a Roth IRA, a regular IRA or a 401k, under Hugh Hewitt's world, you get to take that $10,000 and put it into a Roth IRA. Now, Roth IRAs can't be spent except for housing, college, and retirement. All right, so it's going to go into a savings account for the big thing, but they grow tax-free. IRAs also grow tax-free, but they are taxed at the rate of your income when they come out. Most people don't want to take the money out of their IRA. They want to use only the interest, and there are mandatory withdrawal requirements that are in there once you reach 72 or something like that. But get rid of all that. End the IRAs. We're getting out of the IRA. The nanny state is done. You are in charge of your own money. But we're going to keep the Roth IRA, which allows you to save after-tax dollars that then grow tax-free for your retirement. It's the most important thing that a young person can do is make the maximum contribution to their 401k at work and or do the Roth IRA. The most important thing they can do as young people, because if it's growing tax-free, your retirement will be fine. And you should save 6 to 10% of your income every month. And I teach my law students this every year. Roth IRA, Roth IRA, Roth IRA. But a whole millions of Americans have got IRAs and 401ks. Let's unlock that money, move it over to the Roth IRA for a one-time 10% cut. What the one-time 10% tax? What that would do is bring in trillions of dollars potentially. There are about $22 trillion in 401ks and IRAs. And not everyone's going to convert. Some people just don't even know what's going on in the world. But if they do convert, that gives you a lot of working room in the budget to keep the red ink number down. But we're going to have red ink, and we got to get a lot done, and it's up to them to get it done. Now, I also want to talk to you for a moment about Jim Vandehei, who I like a lot. I've always liked Jim. I like Mike Allen. They started Politico. Politico's off the rails now. It's ruined, except for a couple of reporters like Olivia Beavers. Just left-wing talking points. Axios is a gossip sheet. They lost Jonathan Swan to the New York Times. They still got Mike Allen, who knows everyone in town. Jim knows everyone in town. But Jim got invited to the National Press Club. It got a little bit crazy. Might have had a couple of drinks beforehand. Cut number 6.
Everything we do is under fire. Elon Musk sits on Twitter every day, or X today, saying like, we are the media. You are the media. My message to Elon Musk is, bullshit. You're not the media. You having a blue check mark, a Twitter handle, and 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter any more than you looking at your head.
Stop. Yes, it does. I just posted on my X account a link to my transcript with Susan Collins. That's real news. The incoming chair of the appropriations person. The only way you find it, I put it on my X account. 250,000 people see it. They go and read it. Other people, I often feed Axios and Politico their stories because I'm at work before they are. And I usually make news when I talk to legislators and that kind of thing. So everyone on X is, in fact, media. Not everyone on X is a reporter like me, but everyone on X is media. The idea that you have to live in the Beltway and go to the press club to be a reporter is simply not true. Anyone can be a reporter. It's a craft. It's not a profession. It's not like the law. You don't have to pass a bar exam to become a reporter. You pick up a pen and you start to write. And that's why Substack, the free press, and I will talk to you next hour about podcasts, are destroying legacy media as fast as it can move. But not talk radio. We're still here for your drive. We're still here for your podcasting. We're still here. I will never not be here. And I will always be telling you to contribute to Angel Tree, especially this time of year. Bring Christmas to a child. $30 takes care of one child. His mom and or dad are in prison. $30 gets them a Bible, a present that they picked out, a note for mom and dad on Christmas morning. Help be Santa. Help be St. Nick. Help be Christmas. And you can do that for $30. And if you want to do 10 kids, $300. You Steelers fans, 3,000. Do the math, right? 3,000. How many kids are you taking care of? 100. All right, I wanted to make it easy for the Steelers fans. We're being nice to you because you elected Dave McCormick and Donald Trump. It'll be easy on you, even though you choked on Thursday night in Cleveland. But we're going to be easy on you. All right, we're going to be easy on you. Back with Ty Lassiter. He is the founder and CEO of KeyCityCapital.com. And if you want to learn about Key City Capital, you go to KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh. I have disclosures to make. I am an investor with Key City Capital, and you can invest in the fund that the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I invested in more than 2 years ago. I am an accredited investor, and you have to be an accredited investor. And if you think about it, you got to get the prospectus, read it. I don't make a recommendation. It's not right for everyone. It's right for someone because I don't want to own I don't want to own an apartment building. I want to own a part of apartment buildings that I do not want to manage. And Ty, I want to talk to you about building apartments because the election that's blessedly behind us, Vice President Harris said they wanted to build 3 million units. And I said, the government can't build housing. But I think the market's going to build a lot of housing. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. We work with many governments, government municipalities in different cities that we're in, and they all have a need. They don't have the ability to manage and operate real estate. I had a mentor tell me probably 18 years ago that if you're not a strong individual, this marketplace, real estate, this economy will eat you alive. And I've seen that. 2023, 2024 was an absolute battle. 2007, 2008 was an absolute battle. 2025 is going to be a great year. We're already seeing strong movement. Many of our conversations we're having with our lenders right now are moving back in the right direction. We're seeing patience again in the marketplace. But a lot of the times, government municipalities need the housing. We've got a huge housing crisis right now. Homeless is rampant. We've got to have housing, and the government and local governments need that opportunity. They don't have the ability to manage it. And so what we do is we work closely with them. We provide a product. We oftentimes will market off a segment of a property specifically for government subsidized housing, and depending on the marketplace that we're in. We don't see that quite as much in the Dallas marketplace, but we see it a lot in Memphis where we are. We're in Florida, in some of the markets that we are in Florida, and in Alabama as well.
You know, Ty, I also believe that more and more Americans are moving to red states, and for a variety of reasons, but one of them, they just don't like taxes. I think you build and own exclusively in red states. Are you a red state apartment complex owner or housing owner?
We can absolutely say that. What we have found is that the governing of real estate as a whole in red states is more beneficial to own there because at the end of the day, this is a business. Our investors invest with us to earn income, to increase their investment performance. And so we do run a business. And when a tenant is not paying, we need to be able to expedite the eviction process. I don't want to be in an area like New York or California where a tenant can not pay and end up sitting there for a year or more sometimes working on getting that tenant out. So we do work in red states for a number of reasons, and that's a couple of those.
Now, can I also mention your target demo? I am a broadcaster and a news guy and a lawyer. Lots of lawyers and professionals like doctors and physical therapists, they're really good at what they do and they're very bad at investment. And so I always tell people, do mutual funds. Don't try and guess the market. You don't know that. This goes to rental properties as well. Don't buy an apartment complex unless you know what you're doing. Do you have to tell that to a lot of people, Ty Lassiter?
Absolutely. I have found that I have purchased more of our multifamily and apartment complexes from doctors, from pharmacists that have done a great job of earning income. And I always talk about there's 4 keys to really building wealth rapidly, and that's the ability to generate income, the ability to save, your investment performance, and tax mitigation. Well, what doctors, pharmacists, many professionals do is they earn a high income, but then they try to invest themselves. They're a professional in their own lane. They need to stick with professionals in their investment performance lane as well, because it comes at a risk if you don't know what you're doing. And we have bought many discounted properties from medical professionals who have bought them and then didn't know how to operate and manage those. So I would love to offer one of our complimentary products to any of your listeners, Hugh. And we do what's called a complimentary wealth check. We look at an individual's investments. We share that with them, how the marketplace is doing, what the standard is in the marketplace, and how they can increase their investment performance while overlaying a tax plan with that can help save up to 30% oftentimes on taxes.
And you're not trying to steal anybody's business from investment professionals. Investment professionals should call you as well because it's a product line. It's a limited partnership in a housing development or apartment complex. And that's why I just don't want to diversify. As I get older, I want to diversify. And Ty, what's the average age of your investor?
Oh, man, that's a good question. Average age is about 57 years old. We've got a number of retired individuals. We've also got a number of young entrepreneurs, and we've got a number of people that are right in the middle of their prime in whatever profession it is that they have.
Diversify. Give Ty a call or go to keycitycapital.com/Hugh. They are a client. They are a sponsor. I am an investor, and you got to be an accredited investor. And I do not give investment advice. But if you're thinking about, gosh, I'd like to own a piece of an apartment complex, don't buy one. Call, or at least call Ty first. keycitycapital.com/Hugh. Joined by Brett Baer, host of Special Report. You can watch Brett every night at 6 p.m. on the Fox News Channel. Happy Thanksgiving in advance to you, Brett. I hope you get a couple of days off this week.
I will. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. I want to begin with a Fox News story that just broke. I posted it over on my X account. DNC union launches GoFundMe for staffers hit by massive layoffs after election losses. I'm kind of surprised by this, Brett. Presidential campaigns end. They always end. What do you think is going on there?
I don't know. It's really amazing, the unwinding of this of the campaign and exactly how much money was spent in a very short amount of time. And this seems like they are caught off guard that the campaign was coming to an end. It seems pretty mismanaged at the top there, and I think you've heard some finance people on the Democratic side express a lot of angst and anger about that.
As a Republican, I do not hope that Rahm Emanuel runs the DNC because he'd be very good at it. But it does seem to me if they're serious, they would bring in Rahm. What is your understanding of who's in the hunt for that and who is the leader?
I think Rahm probably is in the pole position. I think O'Malley from Maryland is going to make a run. I think a few others. It's going to have to, Hugh, be a change of process, a change of thought about, this is almost coming out of the wilderness now after a loss like this. And, they'll look at the popular vote and say it wasn't, it's a divided nation, but you look at those swing states that all tip, it shows that the Trump campaign was good at touching, especially American workers.
Yeah. Now, I began the program with Senator Collins this morning, who got up early to talk to me because she's going to be the chair of appropriations. And we talked about the reconciliation process and how the budget has to get done in order to do the reconciliation. Do you think Donald Trump will put pedal to the metal here? Because if you want the economy to boom, you'd better extend those tax cuts in a hurry in time for them to be working for the 2026 midterm, or the Republicans will get wiped out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's going to happen right off the start of January 20th, and I think there will be a push on the tax cuts. I think you've seen Scott Bessent articulate some of that. I think there's going to be a major push on energy, and you'll see that, and I think that sector will really boom right away. And I think there's going to be a major push on immigration and keeping the borders secure. I'm not sure what the deportation will look like. I think that's going to take some time. But I do think that the pressure on Mexico and Canada that we saw last night is going to be part of the equation.
Okay. Now, Brett, I talked to Byron earlier, and I proposed the same thing. I just want your reaction. When the president goes into reconciliation, he's going to demand the money and the authorization to build the border wall in the first year and get it done. And that's a given. But he could also ask for, and I think would get, regularization for the Dreamers, a little Nixon to China there. Do you think he will, and should he?
I think he may, and it would probably go a long way to reaching across the aisle for something. I think people are going to be surprised at how much President-elect Trump does some of that. And I think that he's, I think he's going to make some inroads to try to do bigger things. His mandate is to get the stuff he talked about on the campaign trail done. But I think his real mandate is legacy and trying to get big things done quickly, because, as you know, you have about 2 years.
And you get two big swings with a majority in the Senate, the budget reconciliation trailer bills. And I hope they are ambitious in year number one. Let me talk to you about appointees. I'm very happy with Pam Bondi. I think John Sauer is a great SG. Todd Blanche will be a good deputy. That's the criminal stuff. But in terms of the Department of Justice and the FBI, Brett, they are diseased at the top. And by diseased, I mean they become partisan. How many people do you think will be shown the exits at both agencies? One agency, but they're two titles.
Right. I think it'll be significant. If not shown the door, then probably leaving themselves. If I had to
self-deportation.
Yeah. I think that might be a real thing for DOJ in some corners. Listen, he's going to have this effort to kind of figure out what happened, and that can get messy. I don't know who's going to be the head of the FBI. I'm not sure that Kash Patel is going to get to the top rung there, but I know that Pam Bondi is probably going to run a tight ship.
One of my old colleagues from the White House counsel's office sent me a note that dispensing with the full field background investigation is not a good idea. I kind of disagree with him, but I am open to being persuaded. What do you think about that, Brett? Because you do miss stuff, and especially the Ethics and Government Act can trip people up if they have done well in their lives with what they have to divest. You're not allowed to hold certain stocks, et cetera. What do you think about the truncated process Trump is putting together?
Yeah, I think that there's a danger there. It's a double-edged sword. It may speed things up, but then you may get tripped up by somebody that doesn't tell you something. That becomes a problem. We've seen that time and again in nominees who have something that the FBI check would have gotten, and that's the only problem. maybe not the only problem, but it is a problem, and it could slow down the whole effort as far as momentum.
No, I think Pete Hegseth is going to get confirmed. He's your colleague, so I'm not going to ask you about that. Is there anybody else in the cabinet nominees that you think has a difficult path ahead? Because Matt Gaetz is gone, Pam Bondi will fly through. I don't think I see anyone with trouble other than Pete, but I think Pete will get through. Your assessment of everyone but Pete.
Well, I'm happy to talk about Pete. I think Pete's a great guy. I think that I think the issues of the nomination are public, and I think that it's a simple head count. And right now, I'm not sure it's there. So that's not to say it's not going to happen, but I think that he's got some headwinds as far as making inroads on Capitol Hill. On others, I think Tulsi Gabbard's probably the biggest. I don't see Kennedy having a major problem, but I think Tulsi Gabbard is maybe there'll be some things that come up that cause some issues. Remember, you don't have to lose that many people up there on the whip count.
Yeah,
and,
4 votes.
It becomes an issue. Yeah.
Now, DNI, though, has always struck me, ever since I watched Dan Coates at Aspen, they don't really have a job. They have input, but they don't really have statutory authority. That's why John Ratcliffe, who had been the DNI, said, give me the agency, and got the agency. The DNI really does not have much access or authority. They have input but not authority. I can't see that being a problem. Is there anybody else? And I agree with you on RFK. He was part of the campaign. He might have provided the margin. He's going to get confirmed because people know that he's a little bit, well, he's actually quite eccentric in his life and views. But this is a old-fashioned political IOU, you get this, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And also I think there may be some Democrats who, don't want to vote against a Kennedy. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but he's got the name, he campaigned. There were a lot of women who listened to his, thoughts about what's going in your cereal for your kids. That there's concern. There's a lot of it. So you weigh the things that he said that on the out of the mainstream, and you weigh the things that really may have tipped the balance in some of those suburban women voters.
Is there any name that has surprised you, Brett?
Well, Matt Gaetz surprised me.
Well, that's it. Current name.
Yeah. I don't think. Listen, I think overall, if you look at how people have perceived this, Hugh did a study, a survey. I think it was 53, 47, something like that, about positivity for the transition. And I think there's going to be some leeway here. And so I think if you were to judge it, the Matt Gaetz thing was a mistake, but Pam Bondi actually is better in the wake of having Matt Gaetz go first.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think that there may be bumpy roads for some of them, but for the most part, I think people are going to get through.
Yeah, the Gaetz, I was reminded of Major League, just a bit outside, Bob Uecker. But we're now back in the strike zone, and Brett Baer, I'll be watching tonight, 6 p.m., as I do every night that I'm close to a television. Special report at 6 with Brett Baer. It's the week that we wait for. It's game week. And on Saturday, I am filling in for Dennis Prager, is recovering from injury. And I'm going to be on a boat in the Caribbean because Dennis can't go. So I'm going to go, and then Mike Gallagher is going to tap in and tap out. I'm going to come back. I'll be back on Thursday of next week, but I'll be off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, taking Dennis's place, which is not really possible, but I'll be doing that. I will do whatever they need me to do. I just asked them to please block off Saturday 12 to 3 because that is the game, and we're going to crush that team up north. And by we, I mean the Buckeyes and everyone in Ohio. Greatest rivalry in sports, Ohio State and the team up north. And it's going to be great. And they're going to get crushed. Sorry, guys, you're going to have a long drive back to Ann Arbor. Let me tell you about something else that's going to get crushed. The wasteful, vast the federal government is going to get broken. And I have a column today on budget reconciliation. and how once a year, a president who has his party in control of both houses can use the Budget Reconciliation Act of 1974 to pass bills without 60 votes in the Senate. So the Republicans have 53 votes. They can lose 3 and still win. And they need to do a budget, and they need to make that bold. It's got to do the tax cut extension, got to do tax cut revision. It's got to do the border wall, the expansion of the Border Patrol, the expansion of ICE. I hope it does dreamer regularization as well, which you can add into the budget process by charging them $100 each, because then it'll have a budget impact. That's the rule for the parliamentarians, got to affect the spending and the taxes. Then you can go and say, we're not going to spend any money in block grants or any money at all on any state that does not have a school choice program in place. And we'll give you until 2025, the end of the year, to get it in place. Got to be the equal of California or Florida or, excuse me, not California, Florida or Ohio or Iowa. You got to get it done. You've got to get it done. What I need you to get done, there's a lot. Go read the column. I need you to go and contribute to our friends at Angel Tree. They make sure Christmas comes for every child of a prisoner, whether or not mom and dad has been gone for a year, 5 years, 10 years. It always helps to get a present from them. Something that the kid wants, something that the child has requested. They get a note from mom or dad. Here's a baseball glove. I'm thinking of you, son. I'm sorry I can't be there. And that's what they get. A note from mom or dad, a present and a family Bible, a kid's Bible, and a connection to Angel Tree. $30 a child. If you give $300, you're taking care of 10 children. Please be as generous as possible. The list is long. There are a lot of people incarcerated in the United States, and many of them, if not most, have children, and those children deserve to have Christmas. They really do deserve to have Christmas. So please be as generous as you possibly can. Now, in that budget resolution that unlocks reconciliation, they can do a lot of cutting. They need to cut the Corporation for Public Broadcast to zero. They got to shutter the National Endowment for the Humanities and shutter the National Endowment for the Arts. And if any Republican stands in the way, Donald Trump says, you just got yourself a primary opponent. There are 20 Republicans who are running for Senate, and they should all participate in cutting the government. And this is low-hanging fruit. This is not major dollars. That's entitlement reform, and that's got to be bipartisan. The only way to do it. But the Republicans can cut a whole bunch out of a whole lot, beginning with the lowest hanging fruit. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, there is no reason for us to spend a dime on it. Here I am. There's media everywhere. We no longer need PBS to be funded by the federal government. NPR is a fabulous radio station full of professionals. They get less than 1% of their budget from the federal government. Not much. Cut it. If you can't lose 5 pounds, you can't lose 100. Right? That's what I always say. Start with the easy stuff, low-hanging fruit. And that is all laid out in Kevin Roberts' brand new book, Dawn's Early Light. Kevin is the president of the Heritage Foundation, and they are a sponsor of my show. And Dawn's Early Light, Taking Back Washington, Save America, is a detailed, persuasive, by the way, his personal story, which I did not know, is riveting. I'm looking forward to talking to Kevin, I think, next week, and it might be the week thereafter. But Dawn's Early Light is a must-read book on the Uniparty and how the Uniparty obstructs reform. And, you know, sometimes we overstate how big the Uniparty is. It's really Democrats and about 5 Republicans. But, it's there, got to be beaten, and the administrative state will fight like heck to save their jobs. And there are, 800,000 people working at the Pentagon, and most of them are necessary. They are all over the world. But you can cut 5%, obviously. There ought to be a RIF, reduction in force, for every agency of 20% except the Pentagon. The Pentagon might be 5%, might be 10%. I don't know. Just a mandatory, notwithstanding any other rule, not required. Up to the agency head, up to the Secretary of the Cabinet, to dispatch and say, here's your pink slip. Sorry, you got to get a job. Not in the government, because we are skinnying down the government. Because you can't persuade people to do hard things unless you've done the easy thing. And the easy things are right there. Reduce the size of the federal government, cut the spending that is absolutely Christmas tree spending, a lot of grants, no more money for any single university in the United States with $1 billion endowment. Spend down your endowment. Then we can talk about grants. I am not in favor of grants to anybody with a big endowment. Absolutely not. Venture funds with the universities attached should not be getting federal money. And it's very easy to do that. So, reconciliation, get moving. If you want good ideas, go read Dawn's Early Light. Now, I want to go back to Jim Vanderhei, because this got a lot of attention. And I like Jim. I've only met him a couple of times. I knew Mike Allen pretty well. Mike used to be a weekly guest on this program. Then he stopped. Didn't want to come on anymore because I asked tough questions of everyone. He didn't want to answer tough questions, which makes Jim's comment kind of funny. Let's listen to Jim Vanderhei yesterday or earlier this week at the National Press Club. Cut number 6.
Everything we do is under fire. Elon Musk sits on Twitter every day, or X today, saying like, we are the media. You are the media. My message to Elon Musk is bullshit. You're not the media. You having a blue check mark, a Twitter handle, and 300 words of cleverness doesn't make you a reporter any more than me looking at your head and seeing that you have a brain and telling you have an awesome set of tools makes me a damn neurosurgeon, right? Like what we
Actually, not the case. All right, let's just start right there with the fallacy. A reporter is not a neurosurgeon. A neurosurgeon is a professional. A neurosurgeon must go to school for at least 9 years, 4 of medical, 3 residency, postdoc. I have to ask Dr. Carson how long it takes to become a neurosurgeon, but it takes 9 years of education. Then you have to pass your boards. Then you have to be permitted wherever you are working. You are a professional. To be a lawyer, you have to pass a bar exam. You want to be a lawyer in 2 states. If they don't have reciprocity, you have to pass 2 bar exams. I passed the District of Columbia bar exam. 6 years later, I passed the California bar exam. I am a professional. Journalism is not a profession. Journalism is, to quote the late Michael Kelly, a craft. It is like woodworking. It is like painting. It is a craft. No one tells you that you are an artist. You are just an artist or you're not an artist. Nobody tells you you're a journalist. If you're doing the high school newspaper, you're a journalist. If you're doing the New York Times, you're a journalist. If you're doing the Hugh Hewitt show, you're a journalist. Everyone is a journalist who is involved in the production of media for consumption that is intended to inform and possibly entertain. Joe Rogan is a journalist, probably the most significant journalist in the last cycle. Megyn Kelly is a journalist. She has no platform other than the Megyn Kelly show. I want to tell you why Jim is so upset. And Jim is so upset because of this. This is the list of my podcasts on my cell phone. The Daily Briefing, Wine and Gold, The Podcast, that's Doug LeMaries and Bill Landis, Charles C.W. Cook Podcast, Ruthless, Buckeye Talk, Orange and Brown Talk, The Megyn Kelly Show, Kings of the North. You can see there's a little sports in here. The FDD, Foundation for Defense of Democracy, Daily Events Podcast, Commentary Magazine Daily, Dan Senor, Call Me Back. The rest is history. Don't get to that very often, but Tom Holland's very good. Goodfellows, out of the Hoover Institution. The editors, of course, from National Review. Dwayne's World. Of course, Dwayne's World I listen to find out what nasty things he's saying about me behind my back. Getting Hammered, which is a must listen to. It's the favorite crossover podcast. The Venn diagram of the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt's podcast and mine has one podcast in it. One, Getting Hammered. It's hilarious. What Matters Now from the Times of Israel. The McCarthy Report. Andrew McCarthy, Rich Lowry. The Triple Option. That's Coach Myers, Mark Ingram, and Mr. Stone from Fox. For Heaven's Sake from the Times of... No, actually, that's from the Hartman Institute in Israel. Terry's Talking, Terry Pluto. Mark Price for 3. And Civilized Barking, Look Through the Chaos, John Campbell. I've got about 20 podcasts. That's why news is reeling. Better people are delivering the news than CNN and MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC. Better people are delivering the news on Fox. Special Report has the highest rated news show on cable because it's a news show. Better people, more informed, more balanced people are doing it on the radio, like me, like my Salem colleagues. There are better people on podcasts. You want to know what happened in the election? You actually listen to Ruthless. That's why Jim is upset. And you know what? He ought to ask himself, what would have been useful? What are we not doing? We are not putting ourselves in harm's way. We are not going on the Rogan show. We're not going on the Hewitt show. We're not answering tough questions about what we cover and why. We're not talking about our bias. We're not talking about how Politico went from being a fine product to being a left-wing talking point sheet. We're not talking about the New York Times losing its mind. We're not talking about the other major legacy media losing their mind and going left-wing. We're not talking about any of that. And we should be, because we're captive of the Beltway and people don't trust us anymore. That's what Jim ought to have said, but he didn't. He complained about Elon Musk and Twitter. Seriously, unless you know where you are, you can't get to where you want to go. All right? You got to know where you are, and right now you're broken. David Drucker, I hope you're rooting for the Buckeyes this weekend.
I don't know. I mean, I know that I'm in the Big Ten now with UCLA, but that basically means I hate everybody.
You know, you're not really in the Big Ten. You're like the kiddies table at Thanksgiving. UCLA and USC and Oregon and why they sit over at the little table because they can't win except for the Ducks.
You're right.
All right, David, I wrote a column today for Fox News, and I began the show with Susan Collins, chair of appropriations. Do you think Trump and the speaker and the leader and their relevant chairs can get the budget reconciliation process done in a hurry?
I don't know if they can get it done in a hurry, and it sort of depends on what you mean by in a hurry. But of all the things that they can get done that may have a high degree of difficulty, this is one of those things that will get done.
And so how ambitious? Obviously, they got to extend the Trump tax cuts. That's the first thing Senator Collins said, and revise them, including expanding the SALT deduction. They've got to get the wall built. They've got to rebuild the military. There are a bunch of things they could do. How ambitious and how much political capital should Trump put into this? My view is, so that you can react, they got to do it in a hurry because the economy's got to be cooking by the midterms in 2026, which are 23 months away now.
Well, listen, I mean, doing things that you think are good policy, they're going to have a big impact on the economy in particular, is clearly something you want to move quickly on. But usually when you're dealing with appropriations, which you get a lot of cooks in the kitchen there, and you're dealing with tax reform or a tax overhaul, which can get very technical and there are a lot of unintended consequences. Hugh, for instance, when they passed the first round of tax reform, because that Trump bill, well, it was a joint effort of House and Senate Republicans along with the Trump administration. It originally was going to penalize electricians and plumbers who were sole proprietors and ran their own businesses, maybe as LLCs or things of that nature. And Ron Johnson had to step in and fix it. So my point to you would be, you may want to move quickly, but you don't want to move so quickly that there ends up being, taxpayers penalized and parts of the bill that doesn't help the economy and hurts the very people that Trump intends to help.
Now, given that the economy sucks, and it does, and people are in the wrong direction moving, that's why Kamala Harris lost so badly, it seems to me that December and January ought not to be vacation months for Senate, House staff, and the incoming Russ Vought, Bessent, Mike Waltz. They all ought to be huddled in D.C. figuring this out, David. I mean, the tradition, we'll get there in January, we'll have some fun, the inauguration's a great deal on the 21st, then we'll get around to the budget in February, and maybe we'll get the resolution passed in March, and April 15th is the deadline. That doesn't fly for me. I don't think it flies for the country. Am I right?
Well, listen, I just think people want results. I don't really think they care, whether Congress is in or out or, whether people are on vacation or not. I think they want results. What I would say to you is the biggest result I think they want is for costs to catch up with inflation, right? And for inflation not to go back in the wrong direction. And I think they want that more than any other part of, whatever their view is of the economy. That is what hurt the outgoing administration the most politically. That is what was the biggest opportunity for the Trump campaign. And so I think these are the things that they need to work on if you were to ask a voter what matters to you the most. And in the meantime, they've got spending bills to figure out to get into the next year and things of that nature.
And they've got to drill, baby, drill. And not only that, they need small modular reactors. That'll be up to Doug Burgum and the National Energy Council. That is the only way to bring down prices, to bring down the cost of production. The only way to bring down the cost of production is to bring down the cost of energy. Do you think they're going to do it, David?
Well, we will see. When you're dealing with things like this, it's hard to move that quickly, but we'll see what the posture is. I also think Trump's trade policy is going to have a lot to do with the state of the economy and with inflation in particular. The bond markets right now are pricing in the idea that Trump's trade policies are going to be inflationary. I'm not saying they will, but you've got a lot of different things moving here at the same time. What do Americans want? They want an improvement in their quality of life and the cost of living, and all these other things to them are ancillary. They may be important ways for voters to get what they voted for them to feel like the economy is in better shape. But they're not going to look at all those details. They're going to look at the bottom line.
They're going to look at prices. And the most important words in the congressional language, notwithstanding any other law. That's the magic key, notwithstanding any other law, not NEPA, not CEQA, nothing. We're going to build reactors. We're going to drill for oil. We're going to have a market that's forward-looking, bringing down the cost of energy, which will impact your bottom line at the grocery store. David M. Drucker of The Dispatch. You can go and follow him on X. You can subscribe to The Dispatch. Thank you, David.